I'm Sam. Welcome back to Brickwall Pictures. Today I'm doing a Paul Thomas Anderson, aka PTA, tier list. If you're new to the channel, I've done a bunch of tier lists lately for a whole bunch of filmmakers and some martial artists. Like I did a Donnie Yen tier list, and Iko Uwais, and Tony Jaa, and Jackie Chan, and Jet Li, and a bunch of other directors. I did Martin Scorsese, David Lynch, Noah Baumbach, Jim Jarmusch. So if you want to see tier lists for any of them, check the link in the description. There will be a playlist with all those. I bumped PTA up to the top of my agenda for covering tier lists here because he has a new movie in the works. It's not out yet at the time of recording. It might be out wide release by the time that this video is out, but it's not currently. It's Licorice Pizza, his new movie. His first one since The Phantom Thread, and it's been a few years at this point. At the time I'm recording, there's a whole lot of hype for it. There's some people getting the early reviews are coming out, some festival screenings and whatnot, and it's looking real good. I'm excited for it. So I'm going to look back at the rest of his filmography. I got all of his feature films here, and we're going to go through them. First up is The Master. The first time I watched it, I didn't really like it very much. But even from the first time I watched it, I was like, wow, this cinematography is absolutely stunning. And these performances are incredible, right? But I didn't really connect with the story. That being said, I rewatched it, and it worked so much better for me. And then I rewatched it again, and it worked even better for me. So it's one of those movies that gets better on subsequent viewings, at least for me. Now I think it's one of his best. And maybe I was just too young the first time I saw it, because I saw it right when it came out. So I must have been around 14 or 15 when it came out. Maybe I was just too young to get it the first time I watched it, which is, probably the case. On subsequent watches, though, I just like it more and more. If you've been around this channel for a while, then you might already know that Philip Seymour Hoffman is my favorite actor of all time. And The Master includes one of his best performances, one of his best roles. He is incredible in this role. So is Joaquin Phoenix. The Master, I think, is an incredible achievement. It's one of the best-looking movies of the decade. If you saw my decade review video where I look back at all the movies from the 2010s before it got blocked worldwide on bullshit copyright claims, then you know that I gave The Master a whole bunch of awards, including cinematography and performance as supporting actor for Philip Seymour Hoffman and stuff like that. The script is the area that most improved for me after subsequent watches. I think it's a fantastic screenplay now, whereas it seemed like that was the weak link on my initial viewing. Now I think it's excellent. I think it's an all-around fantastic film. I think it gets the S tier, honestly, which is crazy because on my first watch, I probably would have put it in D tier or something. On my second watch, it was probably maybe B tier. After watching it a couple of times, I think it's S tier. It's at least A tier. Maybe I'll leave it in A tier for now, and I will revisit these movies at the end of the tier list here. We'll see where they rank. Next up is Boogie Nights. One of the first video essays I made was about Boogie Nights. You can check out that video if you want. It's very rough around the edges, but Boogie Nights is great. It is so much fun. It's really strong dramatically, but it's also just hilarious. The performances are all great. It's really excellent casting because it has some actors in there who aren't always great actors who don't always have great parts, and it gets the most out of them. I do not like Mark Wahlberg. I think he's just a shitty person. And I also think he gives a lot of bad performances, but he's good in The Departed, he's good in Boogie Nights, so clearly a good director can get a good performance out of him. The whole cast is great. Heather Graham is great as Roller Girl, Burt Reynolds is great, of course, in what is probably one of his best roles, maybe other than Deliverance or something, going way back. Luis Guzman is a lot of fun in it. William H. Macy is great in it. And of course, Philip Seymour Hoffman again. One of the strong suits about PTA's filmography for me is how much he worked with Philip Seymour Hoffman and how he gave him such diverse characters. I always really like and gravitate towards filmmakers who work with the same actors a lot, where they have that stable of actors, how Tarantino will work with Samuel L. Jackson all the time, stuff like that. For PTA, one of his go-tos was Philip Seymour Hoffman. It's not a situation where he's casting Philip Seymour Hoffman in similar roles. If you look at his role in Boogie Nights, it could not be more different from his role in The Master, which again could not be more different from his role in Punch Drunk Love. It really gave Philip Seymour Hoffman this huge canvas to show everything that he can do, and I think that's incredible. Even if you only looked at PSH's performance in PTA films, he would be one of the finest actors of his generation. That's not even getting into movies he made with other directors. That's how fucking incredible PSH was. I think it's A tier. And it's another one that I might bump up to S tier by the time we get to the end of it, because I really do think it's great. But now we get to Hard 8, which was PTA's first feature film. And this is where it becomes clear that I don't just love everything the guy does. Hard 8 I was so excited for, because it was one of the last ones I had to check out. I had seen a lot of his other films without going back to his first film. I had high expectations from it because I'd heard a lot of good things. I think it's in the Criterion Collection and whatnot. I was pretty disappointed when I watched it. It felt very much like a first film. And that's not always a bad thing. But in this instance, it feels distinctly like he's borrowing from other filmmakers without having his own style yet. And I don't really think you can blame him for that. I mean, he was young when he made it, like very young. And it's a debut feature. So it makes sense that he would pull a lot of inspiration from like filmmakers he loved. But it feels like, he's like trying to make a Scorsese movie. And he's trying to do camera movements that fit with other like some French New Wave stuff, and he's like pulling from all these influences without having his own style yet. That on its own wouldn't be an issue. It also feels like he's pulling a lot from Tarantino, actually, who only got his start a couple of years earlier. The two of them are friends these days more than just peers. Oh, but this was also where he was working with John C. Reilly right off the bat, who was another person he would collaborate with routinely. Another guy who was pretty great in Boogie Nights. John C. Reilly seems to mostly be known for his comedic performances, like his stuff with Will Ferrell and whatnot. I don't care about that. What I do care about is when he gives a good dramatic performance, like in this. But Hard 8, I feel like the script is very messy. Pulling influence and like mimicking other director styles would be fine if the story was great. I don't think the story is all that great. It feels like things just kind of happen that are not exactly connected to the other happenings in the film. Like when it becomes like a murder cover-up later on in the movie, it's like, what is going on here? It feels meandering in that kind of way. Some of the performances are a little on the weaker side. Not all of them. There are some good performances in it. They're not all great, though. Hard 8 doesn't work so well for me. Honestly, I think it's like D tier. I didn't really get any enjoyment out of it. That might be a little harsh. That's where I'm going to put it for now. Punch Drunk Love was the first PTA film that I saw that I loved. I think I might have seen There Will Be Blood first, but it didn't connect with me as much as Punch Drunk Love did. And I'm someone who, I really dislike a lot of Adam Sandler's movies, like a lot of his starring comedies. You look at something like Punch Drunk Love, or I guess Uncut Gems, or the Meyerowitz stories, and it's clear that the guy has great performances inside of him, and he just needs a great director to bring those performances out of him. Honestly, it seems like Sandler's mostly just in a lot of movies where he's like, yeah, I can hang out with old friends of mine, make a shit ton of money, put in very little effort, and I have a huge audience who will eat it up. So if you look at it from that perspective, and you don't really care about your body of work, the overall quality of it, then from his perspective, it's like, why not do that, I guess? Sandler is fantastic in Punch Drunk Love. It's a complex character, and he does a great job. So does Emily Watson, who's great in it as well. But also, my man PSH as the Mattress Man, so fucking good.
No. Shut up! Shut the fuck up!
You have no right to take me.
Shut up! Will you shut up? Shut up! Shut up! Shut up!
PSH is so great. I would watch this movie again right now just for his scenes, But the whole movie it's just great. I love the color palette. I love the cinematography, even though it feels much more, I guess, restrained and simple than a lot of PTA's other movies. It's not as, jaw-dropping, but I feel like the cinematography is just so perfectly appropriate at every moment, and it gets a lot of striking and beautiful images out of the mundane. It's very simple visuals, but they're just so perfectly appropriate, and they're memorable even though they are more mundane than a lot of the more showy visuals in something like The Master or There Will Be Blood or whatnot. Punch Drunk Love, I think, is great. This one's S tier, no doubt, for me. I think some people might consider lesser PTA for the it's a little more mundane, but I just think the characters are just so excellent. The story is great. The performances are perfect from the whole cast. Punch Drunk Love is special, and it's probably his movie that it is definitely his movie that I feel like is the most emotionally resonant for me anyway. Next up we have Magnolia. Magnolia, it seems like people are maybe a little divided on as far as the reception to it. It is a vignette film, at least that's what I would call it. I don't know if everyone would call it that, because it's not a vignette film, I guess, in the strictest sense, where it's vignette, ending, next vignette starts and then ends and then blah, blah, blah. That's one way to do a vignette film. I would consider this a vignette film, but I would also consider something like Crash and like Smoke a vignette film. That's what a good vignette film is to me, where it's like these little stories that aren't explicitly connected, but there'll be a little bit of overlap between them. Magnolia is a big film. It's expansive. It's a huge cast of characters that are all fascinating. And I love Magnolia. I think it's one of his best films. I think it's an incredible achievement. I think it's like Crash if Crash didn't suck ass. Magnolia is maybe a little bit more of a personal pick for me because it's what I've been using as an antecedent for one of my scripts I hope to make someday, where it's got this big, large cast of characters and the setting's important and we kind of alternate between them with a little bit of overlap and stuff. So it's important to me in that way because it shows that like that kind of story works, even though there's a whole lot of pushback against a story like that, where you have a lot of characters. There's a reason why it's rare to see a film with all of these characters that are so disparate. And it's not because people don't want to tell stories like that, it's because it's really hard to get them made because it seems like much more of a gamble from like a studio perspective, and it's very unconventional to tell a story that way. Just the whole cast is at like the top of their game. Again, Philip Seymour Hoffman's great. Tom Cruise gives probably his best performance. When I think of Tom Cruise's great performance, I think of him in this, in Magnolia, and him in Collateral. John C. Reilly's really good again. Julianne Moore is great in this. Just the whole cast, every character is so distinct and interesting. And the way that they overlap is like the perfect amount for me. Some people might watch it and understandably like want more cohesion between them all. To me, what Magnolia is doing is just perfectly achieved, even though it's more specific and will not work for everybody. So if you don't like Magnolia, it's like, I get it. It just works perfectly for me. And it's another S tier. Inherent Vice probably made like the smallest splash of all of his movies, except possibly for Hard 8 because it was his first one. And you can kind of see why. It's adapted from a Thomas Pynchon novel, who is a very strange writer in general, and it makes for a strange movie. It's not bad. A lot of people call this like awful, like it's his one big misstep. I don't think it's bad at all, but it's definitely not up to his usual standard. But I think it's kind of like a matter of the source material. I have a feeling, I've only seen Inherent Vice once, and I have a feeling that it might be like The Master, where when I rewatch it, I might like it a little bit more. For right now, I'm going to pop it in C tier, and I'll revisit it at some point in the future, and it might go up. All right, next up is There Will Be Blood. This is probably like the fan favorite. It's the one that has like the most like reviews and video essays and celebration for online and whatnot. And I think there's good reason for that. Daniel Day-Lewis is incredible as Daniel Plainview, the main character. And I feel like not enough credit gets paid to Paul Dano, who not only holds his own against Daniel Day-Lewis, which is an achievement on its own right, but he's incredible. And he's got like kind of two characters. Paul Dano, I think his performance is like just as impressive as Daniel Day-Lewis. I don't think it's like playing second fiddle. I think Paul Dano's like as good. I think he's on the same level. Paul Dano's an incredible actor in general, who doesn't get enough credit in general. There Will Be Blood, again, excellent cinematography, great individual scenes. Like the opening is incredible. Any scene where Daniel Day-Lewis and Paul Dano share the scene, there's just fireworks between them. They are so good playing off of each other. And then the ending scene is, of course, just, I mean, it's iconic at this point. The I drink your milkshake line is so great, and it has, kind of grown beyond the movie. There's people who know the I drink your milkshake line and have never seen the fucking movie and probably don't even know what movie that line is from. It's kind of just, it has infected the popular lexicon at this point. So it's got all that great stuff. For me, though, here's where we might differ. Some of the stuff between those great moments drags a little bit. And I've seen There Will Be Blood, maybe 3 times probably. I think it's great. I think visually, it's always strong. Performance-wise, it's always strong. Story-wise, I feel like it could be tightened a little bit. For me, that's what holds it back from being on the level of The Master and Boogie Nights. I'm going to put it in B for right now, but if I end up moving The Master and Boogie Nights up, I would also move There Will Be Blood up a level 2, I think. We'll see. We'll revisit. We got one more to talk about first, which is The Phantom Thread. Now, The Phantom Thread was a big deal because it was supposedly Daniel Day-Lewis's last performance. We'll see if that holds true, because I think he's said that a couple times in the past where he's like, I'm retiring, and then he ended up doing more movies. This is one where PTA was his own cinematographer, which is extremely impressive, because not just because it's a whole different skill set from being a director, but just like if you've ever like made a movie, if you've been on a set, you know how demanding it is to do both of those jobs. It's extremely complex. And the fact that he was able to do both at this scale and achieve such incredible results is a real testament to Paul Thomas Anderson's abilities. This is a gorgeous film. It might even be his best looking film, although I think The Master looks better. And when I'm thinking of individual shots, I can remember individual shots from Punch Drunk Love more than I can from Phantom Thread. And There Will Be Blood more than Phantom Thread too. But it is gorgeous. Like the way texture and color, especially color, I feel like, and that is owed to the production design as well. Like, and the costume design is also incredible. The performances are great. But I do have some more negatives with this film. I feel like for how great Daniel Day-Lewis's performance is, the character feels a little underwritten. I feel like this is actually not... It's not that the character is like one note or anything. Like it's not that. I just feel like the character isn't really all that interesting. He is complex, but he's not that interesting to me. And for how gorgeous the movie looks, I don't find the story all that interesting. There's certainly some interesting elements to it, like you have the Munchausen's by proxy element, which has been in other stories. Like I kind of feel like was done better in Sharp Objects, both the Gillian Flynn novel and the Sharp Objects miniseries, and in a couple other films as well. Yeah, I feel like it's so like immaculately constructed, but it's the script that lets it down for me, both the character writing and the actual narrative being told. For me, I think, it might sound harsh, but I think it's a C for me. Even though, like, if we were just judging the, like, production of it, it would be much higher. It would be A tier, probably. But the story brings it down a lot for me. Okay, now it's time to revisit these rankings. S tier, Punch Drunk Love, Magnolia. Yes, I firmly believe that. Now the question is, do I bump up The Master, or do I bump up Boogie Nights, and possibly even There Will Be Blood? I am going to bump up There Will Be Blood, for sure. Now it's a question of, do the others get bumped up as well? This is something I always debate in these videos of how strict do I be on the S tier. Because there's this thing of like, if I give out too many S tiers, it stops holding as much weight. You know, I feel like I got to be picky on the S tiers. It's a hard decision. It's not an easy choice here. Ah, man, it's so often when I'm making these videos, it's like I feel one way when recording, and then by the time I'm editing, I'm then feeling a little different on it, and I'm like, oh, I should have done this differently, you know, whatever. And then by the time I release it, I'm again feeling different from how I was when I was editing it, you know. So it's very much like fluctuates, you know what I mean? And right now, I do think The Master deserves S tier. And I think I'm going to leave Boogie Nights and There Will Be Blood in the A tier. And yeah, I think no B tier, oddly enough. But then we have Phantom Thread, Inherent Vice in the C tier, and Hard 8 in the D tier. I think that's where I'm going to leave it. So yeah, PTA, excellent filmmaker. Very excited for Licorice Pizza. Looks great. It looks very much in line with Boogie Nights, more so than his more recent stuff, which I am excited to see because I like early PTA a whole lot. Thanks for watching. Check out my other tier list for other filmmakers down in the description. There's a whole playlist. Make sure you subscribe to Brickwall Pictures. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.
Oi. Fuck! Did you just say go fuck myself?